Okay. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be tricky to do properly, so I'm hopefully going to be able to do this in one take. So if you're hearing this is take one, and hopefully we make it in take one and we don't actually have to redo this more than once. Mainly because of some privacy issues and some requests for anonymity that I'm going to respect, because I'm not a journalist per se, but I am a writer. And I want to respect when I ask people for permissions for use of things that I actually, respect their wishes when they say yes or not. So talking about the issue, not the actual content, is kind of where we're going to draw the line here. There seems to be a hesitancy to talk about how we got to online ministry and online worship from people who are leaders in this field in a manner that allows for the kind of back and forth debate or back and forth kind of cross-examination of the facts of what we're doing. So being a writer who wants to write about this stuff and having published a book like this, I'm well familiar with the process of, soliciting for interviews. I've done a bunch of interviews. You can see them on my YouTube channel. And so after the pandemic kind of slowed down, I know it's still kind of going on, but it's not like it was before where we have to be online. There was this big push to keep the momentum that we had online as something that had intrinsic value. And one of the reasons why I'm doing these videos is because I'm questioning that value. So I talk to everybody. I talk to as many people as I can. If you are sticking your head above the crowd in a way that lets people know that you are for this, either by providing a service or providing, language around it or content around it, everything to do with online church or online worship, you've likely got an email from me sitting somewhere in your junk file. Because I want to talk to everyone. And I have approached, probably 20, 30 different organizations who deal with this kind of stuff with just the simple ask of, I'd like to do an interview with people on your team, with pastors that are on your team, with individuals who can kind of flesh out this conversation that I think is missing. So in approaching an organization that would be considered one of the leaders in this field, I wasn't able to speak with any of the team, but they were very gracious and they were very supportive of what I was trying to do. And so they let me field questions and answered those questions. And I can't tell you what the questions are because they've asked that I don't. And I can't tell you what the answers are, obviously, because they've asked that I don't either. And I can't tell you what the church is that I asked those questions either, because even though they're willing to answer me as an individual, they didn't want these publicized. And after some digging, the answers are public to the questions I've asked. It was just in a direct way of does this actually represent what the church's, view is on this topic? And they would say yes, but they wouldn't say yes in a cross-examined, interview type style or a question and answer type style of video. And if it was just that church, I probably would have just shelved it and left it alone. But there is this hesitancy to talk about the processes of getting church from previously in person to either a hybrid or to online. And I worry about the churches that are just online, because there are MMO churches or metaverse churches that don't exist as a physical entity elsewhere. Carey Nieuwhof talks about this, that they're digital entities with maybe physical services. And I worry about that because how we got here, and I've probably stated this before, was not by ecumenical fiat. We did not agree as a bunch of very diverse churches that we should be going online as if it was a good unto itself. We went online, and you'll hear the stat of 96% of churches went online during COVID. Well, yeah, we didn't have another option. Your options were go online to try to do something that looked like church, because there was no online church prior to, or get sick or have your pastors arrested. Those were the options. Those were the only option. So it wasn't like we arrived there. We were kind of forced there. And whatever God's purposes were for forcing us or having us be forced onto line for a season, we could speculate that to, the cows come home. But it's assumed that was a good thing. And when you push on that, when you're like, well, let's talk about how it's a good thing. Let's talk about the theological reasoning behind, going online. What are the theological implications of worship services that are pre-recorded, all that kind of stuff. When you start asking those real questions that, people are worried about, namely the churches who aren't online, what you get is not just a wall of silence, because you could expect that, especially as like a tiny YouTuber like me who self-published one book on the topic. Okay, like I understand that I'm not someone people necessarily want to say yes to, because I'm not at that kind of class of content creation and whatnot. But what you get is this hesitancy where why wouldn't you want to talk about this? Why wouldn't you want to be crystal clear about your ecclesiology as a church if you're moving online? And it really is starting to make me wonder, because I don't think those reasons actually exist. I think we got excited and we ended up online, and now we're trying to justify being online as opposed to having to had justified it to get online. Because the people who were in this space doing online worship and online church prior to the pandemic were visionaries. They were trying to do things that no one else was doing, that no one had a reason to be doing. They really saw the value of the internet and social media platforms, and they were being innovative. They were doing things that no one else was doing. But that's not how we all got here. So when you hear people say that 96% of the churches are online, they're using that statistic as if it was a good thing, when it wasn't a good thing. We were not happily online during that 96%. We were forced online through some very questionable circumstances and dangerous circumstances when it came to viral transmission. So the way those things interplay, and the way that there's this hesitancy to talk, you'll see it in hard ways where people just won't answer, and you'll see it in soft ways where people aren't contactable, but they'll talk as if they're an authority. And I have honest questions about that. I have serious questions and concerns about authority figures who are untouchable from the people that they're trying to convince to do something. So if you're online, I want you to know that from the bottom of my heart as a Christian, I care about the church, not just being theologically correct, but having the right reasons for doing things. And I'm not out with these videos where I'm pushing back this to kind of bash people or to make people feel bad or to do all this thing. I'm out here to make sure that we're doing righteous things online, because I think that has value, and I think there are right ways to do ministries online and for the church to exist online in capacities, but there's also wrong ways that we're just glossing over because we're more comfortable with it. There's language changes happening that would never happen otherwise. And maybe the best way to talk about this, the best way to kind of frame the conversation is, can you think of one other thing that the church has kind of universally agreed with for any reason, good or bad, over the last, 100 years? Like if the church tomorrow just, across the board decided on a method of baptism, would that make you pause for concern at all? Like if they just decided, nope, sprinkling infants, that's how baptism is clearly done. 96% of the churches adopted this inside of this 1 year period, so it must be the way. You would ask questions, and you would do that for any hot button social issue. You're talking about women in the pastorate, trans people in membership, baptism, whether or not you'll marry people to objects. I know that's, something that's coming up. Whether you'll marry thruples, like any hot topic, topic that is affecting the church or the church is interacting. If 96% of the church suddenly took one side of that compared to the other, would that be a cause for concern or not? Because that's what's happened apparently with the online church. So I'm going to leave you guys with that thought. This is a bit of a rant and a bit of a concerned prayer for the internet, that, you know, this silence, is not talking about it, isn't actually helping the church, and it's not helping us grow. I'll talk to you guys later.